What's up you guys, it's George. So in this video, we're going to talk about how much money you need to set aside in order to live off your investments completely. And I know the title of this video may sound crazy, retiring by 30, and there are a lot of people out there who are selling a pipe dream of you can retire by 30 as long as you invest in this course. Well, that may work for some people. I'm not here to sell you guys a course or to pitch you any kind of product like that. And believe it or not, but there are actually countless of people out there who have retired by the age of 30 following the strategy that I'm going to outline. So if this idea of retiring early and not having to work for your money is something that interests you, what I want you guys to do is gently tap that like button. I really do appreciate that, and it helps with the YouTube algorithm so the video gets shared with more people. But what we're going to look in particular in this video is something that is called the 4% rule. And that essentially shows just how much money you need to set aside in order to live off your investments completely. Now you can in fact live off different types of investments such as real estate or stock market, for example, or a business that provides income for you. But what we're going to use in this video as an example is a passive stock market investment, and I'll show you exactly how much money you need to have invested in order to live off that investment. So the goal here with this strategy is to simply invest your money and have a large amount of money invested, and then you would essentially live off of that invested income or the growth of that money without touching the principal. And as I'm sure you guys can imagine, if you're not touching the principal of your investment, your money can foreseeably last forever. Now, the sooner you're able to retire is based on how much money you're able to save up and how little money you spend each and every month. And there's actually a whole movement of people following this strategy, and there's something out there which is called FIRE. And FIRE stands for Financial Independence Retire Early. And there are a lot of people out there who are doing blogs, videos, and all sorts of stuff about this concept. And there are countless examples of people out there who have retired by the age of 30 or even less by following these strategies. Alright guys, so there are basically 3 steps you need to follow in order to do this. And as I'm sure you can imagine, step number 1 is to be frugal, or to spend as little money as possible. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is save and invest enough money that the interest or the dividends of that growth pays for your monthly living expenses. So being frugal and saving as much money as possible is actually going to serve 2 different purposes here. Well, number 1, the less you're living on, the more of your paycheck you're able to save up, and the more of your paycheck you're able to save up, the more you can contribute to that freedom fund, which will eventually pay for all of your living expenses. And then second of all, spending as little money as possible every single month. You actually don't need to save as much money to potentially live off that interest or the growth of your money. And we're going to go over those exact numbers right now. Alright guys, so step number 2 here that you have to follow is going to be a tough one. But that is going to be saving 50 to 70% of your home take income. And again, if you're looking to retire by 30, let's say you want to work from the age of 20 for 30 and then not work for the rest of your life. Well, that's going to require some drastic action. And that is why you'll have to live off a microscopic amount. And that is why step number 1 is so important, by cutting down as much as possible on your monthly expenses. So people who are trying to do this, you're not going to see them driving brand new cars or going on vacations. You're probably going to see them eating canned beans and doing campfires in their backyard as summer entertainment. Not that there's anything wrong with this, but they're literally spending as little money as possible because they're focusing on the long-term picture of what they're trying to do. So people who are following this FIRE movement are aiming to save 30 times their annual expenses. And that will allow them to withdraw about 4% per year without basically touching the principal. And that is basically where the 4% rule comes into play. And that is basically where you draw about 4% from your account, and over a long period of time, based on the growth of that account and those investments, it shouldn't be chipping away at the principal, which should, in theory, give you unlimited amount of money. So what you're aiming to do here is lower your monthly expenses as much as possible, figure out how much it costs you to live per year, multiply that by 30, and then save that amount by saving at least 50 to 70% of your income every single week or month, or however often you're getting paid. Alright, so now the question you guys been waiting for. Just how much money you need to have saved up in order to live off that money following the 4% rule? Well, if your annual expenses are $20,000, they would recommend having 30 times that amount saved and investment, so that would mean $600,000. If your annual expenses were $35,000, that number becomes $1,050,000. If you're somebody spending $50,000 per year on your living expenses, you would need to have $1,500,000 saved and invested. And for the final figure here, if you spend about $100,000 per year on cars and housing and food and all of that, you would need to have about $3 million invested to successfully follow this strategy. So I'm sure this goes without saying, guys, but the best way to follow this strategy and retire as quickly as possible is going to keep your monthly expenses as low as possible. And just to put it in perspective, guys, every additional $100 that you spend per month, if you follow this, is an additional $36,000 you need to have set aside in that freedom fund in order to support that $100 monthly spending. So if you're serious about this and you want to retire at 30 or younger, you are spending literally as little money as possible. Alright, so the final step to this strategy is going to be passively investing in the stock market. So most people following this strategy are actually following the Warren Buffett style of passively investing in index funds. And if you're not familiar, index funds are basically a way for you to have a diversified exposure to the stock market, where essentially you're not picking what stocks are going to outperform, you're just passively owning the whole entire market. So people following this strategy are not out there to beat the market, right? They are not stock traders. They are not stock pickers. They are simply passively investing in these low-fee index funds. And essentially what you're doing is you're buying a small piece of the 500 largest publicly traded companies, and all the different dividends they pay out are all put together, and then you earn a quarterly dividend on that ETF. And over the last 100 years or so, the market has returned on average about 8 to 10% per year. So if you're only drawing 4% from that account, based on historical data, you should never be touching that principal over a long period of time. And that is how you would be able to live off 30 times of your annual income if you save that money and invest it. So the last thing I want to do here is I want to put all of this together and give you a real example of how you can follow this strategy and even retire by 30. Now again, this is going to require some very drastic saving, because essentially what you're trying to do here is you're trying to work for 10 years of your life and then not work for the rest of your life. So most people will never be able to accomplish this because of the amount of sacrifice that is required. But that being said, let's go ahead and run the numbers now. So let's say you're earning a salary of $75,000 per year, and ideally you don't have any consumer debt or a student loan or medical bills or anything like that. So you're lucky you haven't gotten sucked into the consumerism and you don't have a brand new car, so your expenses as low as possible. I know this sounds like a theoretical situation, but that was about the same situation that I was in when I graduated college. I was 20 years old, I had no debts, I had no car payments, so I could have been potentially the person to follow this strategy. So after you pay your taxes, your take-home pay is going to be about $56,000. Now we know already that in order to pull this off, you need to save 50 to 70% of your take-home pay in order to live off that income. So we're going to assume that you're saving 70% of your home take pay. So you would need to live off 30% of that post-tax income, which amount to just over $16,000 per year or around $1,400 per month. Now, is that possible? It absolutely is. Is it easy? Absolutely not. You're certainly not going out to bars and buying beers or going out to dinner. You're probably going to be living in a tiny apartment, driving an old car or a bicycle, which I recommend, and eating at home for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So each year you would be saving a staggering amount of money, which is 70% of your take-home pay, or just over $39,000. And that is how you'd be able to pull this off. And assuming you would keep that cost of living the same, about $16,800, your freedom number, or 30 times your annual expenses, would be just over $506,000. So how long would it take for you to save that money? Let's answer that right now. So if you took that $30,000 of year per money that you're saving and invested in the stock market, earning an 8% return, and as we said, the historical data shows that the return in the stock market is about 8 to 10%. We're going to go on the conservative side here and say that you're earning an 8% return. Well, in 10 years at an 8% return, you would have $570,000. And just to circle back, guys, this really comes down to the level of sacrifice. Are you really willing to live off $1,400 per month, or you want to go on vacations, you want to go out to dinner and things like that? So it's not those people who are doing this that are traveling and dining. It's actually those people who are living as frugally as possible and finding enjoyment in other areas of your life other than just spending money on dining and things like that. Is this a strategy that I would personally follow? Probably not, because I'm one of those people who enjoys traveling, I enjoy dining, and I do spend a little bit more money than the average person. So my freedom number would be in the millions of dollars. But instead I follow the strategy of earning as much as possible and saving a lot of that money, allowing that to supplement my income by having that interest or growth of my money paying for a lot of the things that I want. And believe it or not, guys, but there are actually countless of people out there who have followed this strategy and retired at 30 or less. So that's going to wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe, and I hope to see you in the next one.